Okay, Lisa. So we're just going to change this about a bit now. At the moment, we've got booked in a talk about openness, but what we thought we'd do is the follow after this is questions and answers, but at the moment we've got more time for questions and answers than if we put it on later on this afternoon. So we thought we'd switch that around. So now we're just going to, if there's any questions, questions and answers, observations. Is anybody seeing anything? Is anything starting to make sense for people? Are people starting to see anything new within themselves? And if so, this is a time for sharing. This is a time for kind of communicating and talking about it. But likewise, if you've got questions, we can talk about that. This is a time for open conversation, I suppose.
I told a few people this morning I woke up at 5 o'clock, which was completely natural. So I wake up generally early in my life anyway. But for the first time in a very, very long time, I suppose, the first thing I did, I just had a smile on my face. And it was just a calmness. There wasn't anything really in my head. I went to bed last night with some other concerns that came to me just before I went to bed from home, from my daughters. But I woke up this morning and there was a kind of an inner peace that I was aware of. And then also just physically, I struggled quite a lot with sort of psoriatic arthritis all the way through my body, and it's something that it's always there. But even that, my body felt as though there was no pain in it anywhere. It comes after I go and do a walk like this a little bit in my knees, but just that first moment of the day, was a joy.
Beautiful.
Something in there about pain. I had this really, really bad knee, and I was going on holiday, and I was, everything was about this bad knee, my back was bad, and it's really painful. I went to see this lady, and she explained to me that pain is controlled by your immune system, which is something I didn't know. And so she said, and also another thing about pain is you can get used to thinking about it. Always know to yourself that that's what you do. So I had this foot that was flapping, and I sat up walking, and because of this bad knee and this bad back, I walked in a certain way.
Yep.
And my brain was controlling this. So anyway, I was coming home from work one night in the car, and I couldn't get into our road end because they'd bollardy all off, and they'd put traffic lights on it, and I couldn't get in. I thought, how the hell am I going to do this? I got really, really angry. So went up, turned around, came back, stood there at the traffic lights. So I thought, right, I'm going to move those traffic lights, move those bollards, and I'm getting into the driveways. So I got out of the car, moved the traffic lights more into the road, moved the bollards, drove back afterwards. Couldn't make that for everybody else, I'm leaving it as it is. And I got into the driveway and I thought, this little voice in my head said, where's your pain? Where's your pain when you weren't actually thinking about it?
Focusing on it, yes.
And yes, it's there. But I mean, it more that you know that you think about it. And if I don't think about it, I walk properly. And if I do think about it, this foot flaps, which is, it brings it to me that it's my fault a lot of the time that I don't even know I do.
It's interesting, isn't it? I used to suffer a lot with bad backs as a tree surgeon. And I could really suffer a bad back. But if I was sat down watching a film and I was totally engrossed in the film, there was no pain. And I'd go one step before the immune system controls pain. I would go to consciousness. Your consciousness, when you know people who are they're always ill. We all know these people, they're always ill, there's always something wrong, always got a pain. And then there's people who who don't really get ill. They just get on with it. Even if they've got pain, they just kind of get on with it. Some people are totally sucked in by the pain, and some people just get on with it. all a state of mind. It's all a state of mind. For some people I've known, it's become a real identity for them.
I think that was what I've had for a long time, because I've suffered from psoriasis since I was 16, to the point where I was 80% covered, you know, even the soles of my feet. And it was my identity in a strange way. And so I always used to identify with that. Even now, my skin's cleared, but you know, I still have the odd sort of issues with joints and stuff, but it's still something that I find myself identifying with.
Why?
It's my, even though it certainly wasn't my comfy place, it was my place of comfort almost.
The familiar, isn't it?
Yes, the familiarity of it, yes.
You see, and this is it, you know, many people we come across, not many actually, but some people we come across, not many, I'll take that back because that's not true. Some people we come across, but I'm sure there are many people in the world. And to a degree, I've been one of these people where, who am I without my suffering? Who am I without my anger? Who am I if I let go of my unhappiness? Who am I? And I remember sitting down, and the lady who introduced me to the principles, Sue, my friend Sue Huginson. She and I were having a conversation about this, and I remember saying, Sue, if you had said to me, Dave, guess what? A couple of weeks' time, your everyday angry experience is just going to evaporate. You're not going to have it anymore. And your need to intimidate people, your violence, your aggression is not going to be there anymore. And your depression, Dave, it's going to vanish. I would have said to Sue before I woke up, I would have said, Sue, right, is this up for negotiation? Right, let's get rid of the depression. Yeah, good call. Anger, can I keep that, please? My ability to intimidate people, can I please keep that as well? Because that's really useful. You know, when I lose my shit, people become scared. That's really useful. Can we keep that? Can I keep that? And it was only afterwards when I did wake up and I saw that all this stuff that I thought was useful, that I thought was me, that I did identify with, I thought the negative feelings and emotions and experiences were worth keeping in my life because they were familiar. And it always, when I look at it now, it boils down to the question, who did I think I was going to become? What did I think was going to happen to Dave if all of a sudden all his traits disappeared? It's almost like we imagine, we think we are real. We think we are real. We think we are fixed. And when I say the we, I'm talking about the ego. We are so identified with our egos. It was all ego that I was afraid to let go of because I thought it was who I was. And it's interesting, when these things start to die away, more and more happiness and joy fills that void. You cannot have a void. There are no voids in nature. There are no voids in this universe. Space is not a void. It is infinite potential. And when that void becomes opened because all of a sudden we've dropped something. I was going to talk to you about. This is my mum. This is mum. Now it's my job. Angry face. Traffic lights. My mum described it like this. She said she was born with infinite potential. She was born as infinite potential. Bearing in mind that that's a fact that never goes anywhere. You're always infinite potential, we all know. She said, throughout my life, she said, I started to create beliefs. I started to have thought and I started to create beliefs. And as I created beliefs, each belief was like a brick. And she said, before I knew it, she said, I'd created an arc over myself. And not too long, this arc turned into a tunnel. Into a tunnel. And she said, I found myself stood in the middle of this tunnel. She said, and I could no longer see anything apart from everything that I believed. She said, I became narrow-minded and tunnel-visioned. I became narrow-minded and tunnel-visioned. That's what belief will do. It makes us narrow-minded. It takes an infinite potential and it condenses it down into a tunnel where all we can see is down our tunnel of creation, belief. And she said, and I walked around like that, and I had judgment, this judgment about that person, and I had this thought about that, and I had this judgment about this, and this was impossible.
There were some good ones too.
There's some great stuff. This is the whole experience of life. And then she said, it took you a little while to trust that it was only what they said. Saw something in it, you realised there might be something behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you started to listen and you said, bit by bit, the tunnels started to fall down. And all of a sudden, these beliefs are starting to fall down and you can see more. You become more aware, you see more possibilities. I thought it was a beautiful metaphor. I really did. I thought that was a really beautiful metaphor.
You can see the light through the gaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See it.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel as well. I just wanted to share that with you.
No. Yes, I just suffered very bad with insomnia. I've got books on it now, but take the pain now. 15 years it was my entire life. It was more than my identity, it was my life. If you've written up a list of my attributes of who I was, that would be number one, that would be at the top. Everything, every thought, every move I made, everything I drank, the way I sat, everything was about, will it help me sleep? Will I be able to sleep? Will I be able to sleep? 15 years until there, insight. And the insight I had, I won't tell you the whole story about how I had the insight, but after 15 years of battling this monster that is insomnia, this disease that I had, this broken thing inside me, the insight I realized was that insomnia didn't exist. It didn't exist. It was a nothing. It was just a name I was giving to some nights when I didn't sleep well. It wasn't there. It had no existence in its own right at all. And from that moment on, I basically didn't have insomnia anymore. Now, sometimes I still didn't sleep that well, but this monster, this kind of like, it's like a demon in my life, just literally went like that because I realised it wasn't there. It was never there. It was an illusion, but it was, I had turned it into, I cannot even put into words how enormous this thing was in my life. It dominated everything and it didn't exist. And it's still, this is all concepts.
Yeah.
These things are all concepts.
You look at depression,
Yeah.
same thing. What is depression without the label? Well, it's a period of low feeling. What is anxiety without the label? Well, it's a feeling. The moment we give it an identity, we give it a name, we give it a validity, we give it a brick, it becomes a brick. It becomes tunnel is, it's ego. That's it, you know, we're human beings, we like to know shit. like to explain everything. We like to give everything a word. And the moment you give it a word, it becomes, oh, I know that. Oh, I know that. That's real. And then it gets a story created around it and an identity around it. It's like the word tree. Does anybody here know what a tree is? Let's do this. Kelly, what's a tree?
Not that thing out there.
What is it?
It's wood and leaves and bark all together in a thing.
What's wood? I don't know. There you go. So, two questions in. Let's try another one.
Isn't it the same as asking what are we? It's just being.
Okay, let's go. Let's do this.
Okay.
What are we?
It's just that. So yeah, we're just recycled matter.
What's matter?
We don't ultimately know, do we?
No.
It's ultimately when we break down things all the way down. It's an idea that it's vibrational strings of but again, what is it? We don't know, and matter is made up. The majority of it is there is nothing there. The electrons, the protons, the neutrons that are moving around. The space, the majority of an atom is empty space.
What is pick anything? What should it be? What is a laptop? Like,
Not playing.
not you.
Playing.
You're not playing. Alan, what's a laptop? What is a laptop? Describe a laptop.
Computer.
What's a computer?
I think that does things.
Thing that does those things. Right, let's see if we can get that one.
Sort of things. Atoms, vibration.
What are atoms?
And I would have thought,
Just like this thing.
You know, what I'm trying to do, that was a really not an easy one for me to talk about. But what I was trying to get is when you look at anything, we think we know stuff. But when you really start to ask yourself questions about it, go before. Chocolate, what is chocolate? Well, chocolate is a product of the cacao plant. Okay, well, what's the cacao plant? Well, the cacao plant is a plant that lives in South America, I believe. Okay, well, what is a plant? Well, it's a living organism that photosynthesizes. Okay, well, what is a living organism? Well, it's an object that is animated by consciousness. Okay, well, what is consciousness? I don't know. Go to photosynthesis. Let's take photosynthesis and we reverse engineer that. What is photosynthesis? Well, photosynthesis is the system by which the organism obtains energy through light. Okay, well, what is light? Light is a photon. What is a photon? It's a particle. What is a particle? It's a tiny piece of stuff. What is it? I don't know. What are we? You reverse engineer it. You reverse engineer it. You reverse engineer anything. You reverse the conversation around it. Break it down. What is it? What is it? What is it? You will always get back to. Right now.
I just keep getting, it's a formless energy.
Yeah. And then you go, well, what is energy?
It's nothing, it's like it's the universe, it's whatever it is, and we don't know what it is. Well, it's everything. It's to say it even exists.
You can see why the wise people throughout time said, I know I am wise, for I know nothing. Because they knew at the core they cannot know. It's all a story. From I don't know upwards is a story. All a story. Story of creation. And that's why it's really useful to start to see that. Because when we do attach words to it, insomnia is a monster. I can't sleep, isn't it? Depression is a mental illness. I feel like shit today, isn't it? Anxiety, it's a mental disorder. I feel a bit naff today. I feel a bit nervous today, isn't it? The weight of words. Words are just noises. It's all a word is, it's just a noise. I was saying to, who was it I spoke to yesterday, and she said, I was talking about your cousin who's been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and I was talking about labels to her, and she said, but Dave, it was so useful for me when I got diagnosed with schizophrenic. I said, why was that, Hides? She said, oh, I was talking to you, Carolyn. I said, why was that, Hides? And she said, because the moment I was diagnosed, I could go back into my life and I could organize it. And I said, but do you see that schizophrenia is just a really difficult word to spell? It's just a word. That word cannot make you go back into your life and reorganize your life. You did it. It came from inside of you. The label cannot do anything because it doesn't really exist. It's just a concept. But you did it.
But it's a concept, and because it's a concept and we believe that it's outside in until we know, then because you can identify with the concept, it gives you the illusion, it creates the illusion that you now understand and know and can do something, whereas the reality is none of us know, can do anything, have any control. But that, for many of us, that thought is scary until it's not. When when you're comfortable and accepting the fact that you know nothing, you've got no control, so you might as well just surrender and go with it and just enjoy the ride.
You see, the thing that thinks it knows is the ego.
Yeah.
And this is what lives our lives the majority of the time. Ego, or concepts and ideas of who we should be. So you meet different people and you're different in front of them. Like you're different with your parents and what you are with your work colleagues, what you are with your clients, what you are with your children, what you are with your partner. We play different roles in front of people. And then when we start to wake up to that and we realize just be me, whatever, what is me? Well, it's whatever's showing up in the moment. It's like there's no longer a role to play. There's no longer a game to play. You can just be you. Life's a hell of a lot easier.
I think that was the thing for Heidi as well. She thought she was going mad to then get given, oh no, this is what you've got. It calmed her mind down. Like, oh, I'm not going mad. I've got this thing. So then her mind kind of calmed, it cleared, and then she came up with different ways to deal with life, and it helped. That's why it helped her, because it took a lot off her mind, because she'd been panicking and worrying that she was completely losing the plot. And then to be told, this is what you've got, and then we'll give you this medicine that will sort it out. Her mind just automatically calmed. But then she's identified with it. Like, she used to always introduce it. I'm Heidi, I've got schizophrenia. She started coming to 3 Principles things with me in 2005. There's a group in Colchester called the Blue Bloom Foundation, where we'd meet on a Sunday and everyone would just kind of try and talk about the principles. And she'd always just introduce herself as, I'm Heidi, I've got schizophrenia. She'd get it out of the way, but that was why it helped her, I think. Just because it cleared her mind.
But just from what you said, I think that we all have that, because we all have a different, we act in a different way in different environments. When you're at work, when you're with your friends, when you're with your family, we all have split personalities.
I remember talking to Heidi actually at the wedding, she was talking about the voices, she had voices. And I remember thinking at the time, you all have voices.
Yeah.
You all have voices telling us things all the time. I'm not saying Heidi doesn't have a problem or something, I'm just saying we how, I can see how you could take something like voices in your head and that becomes schizophrenia when it's actually just just that monologue that's going on in your head. Sometimes they mean the voices in your head, sometimes they tell you to do things, sometimes they say shitty things about you, sometimes they, and yeah, we've all got that. It's weird, isn't it? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're broken.
I suppose Mary, this is temporary, isn't it? It's the difference between voice and thought.
I think I know that there's a lot of people that have audible voices that are different from their own, talking to them and waking them up in the night. And so it comes through thought, but they'd say it's the same as having a conversation. She said it's like having a radio on in her head all the time. So she has to concentrate very hard if someone's talking to her because there's like a radio on, but she knows her own voice. And that's the thing that's helped her the most is she started to recognize when it's her voice. And then she's got different voices that speak to her. So she's doing amazing. Like she's married, she's working. She's one of the most thoughtful people you could ever meet. And she has done that all in her own time, in her own way. Like we tried to ram the principles down her throat because she'd been diagnosed at 17. I think she was probably 22 when I came across the principles, and her mum was on the same course. And we're like, this is going to save you, learn about this, read this book. And she was just like, back off, look, I don't want any of that. And then I think when she turned 30, in her head, something shifted, like, oh my God, I'm 30 now. Like, and she got interested and she's read some books, she's been to some conferences, she sometimes logs on to some of the things we've done, she listens to things. But the problem is, there isn't any talk with, like, if she still says she hears voices, they want to up her medication. But what they don't hear is that she's got a different relationship with the voices in her head now. And she knows when to ignore them. And like she used to go around with mascara drawn on her face in different ways because she said the voices had told her to do this. Whereas now she might still get those voices, but she doesn't act upon it. But it's been amazing watching her. And I think we've had to learn as a family that it's our issue more of the time than anything to do with her. Like we've wanted her to have a normal life. We've wanted her to be the person we thought she was going to be. And like, that's all about us. And actually, like I still struggle sometimes, but I know that I struggle with a lot of sadness of the life I thought she could have had and those kind of things. But
She just accepted it.
oh, totally. And she showed, like when I moved up to Cumbria, out of everyone in the family, she contacted me like all the time, send me pictures of what she was up to. Oh, I've been to see your mum and dad. Oh, we had a cup of tea, we did this. What are you doing? This one, like, and I'd get irritated sometimes with the bombardment of text, but actually she's always reached out to me and been thoughtful for me. And then other people, maybe not so much. And it's very easy to focus on someone and think there's something wrong with them or they could have been different, but then not notice all the amazing qualities that that person has. And you've been brilliant at pointing that out to me. Like, she's the most thoughtful person. She wouldn't say a bad word about anybody.
It's beautiful.
She would give you everything she's got, even though she hasn't got very much. And she has lived through like some horrific things in her life, like initially getting sectioned at 17, but being in an adult facility, some of the things that happened to her there. She's been forcibly drugged because of her behaviour. She's been arrested, like so much has happened. And she's just like taking it in her stride and she doesn't overthink things. And there's been times like with my nieces and her niece when they were younger, they'd ask a question and they'd be a bit out, I'd be like, oh God, how do I answer this? And I'd be getting really complicated. And then Heidi would just cut to the point and be like, right answer for a 5-year-old or 4-year-old. And she's got so much common sense. And that's the thing, like actually looking for that in people. And when I speak to that in her, she does calm down and that's what you get back. And yeah, it is just a label, but without our judgments, she's an incredible person, isn't she?
It's very easy to focus on, like, and just think that there's all the potential in Heidi or anybody who's suffering, even if they're an adult. There's so much more to that human being than just that little tiny
Facet.
bit of them. But the more that that's focused on, the more that that comes alive within them, and the more, which is why Heidi probably actually been looking at their Jen, because that's just not even there, is it? You just see the wholeness of the person. And that allows them to be completely different from people who don't see their schizophrenia, addiction, anorexia. People feel that.
We'll come back to questions. But I just want to, there was that man when you were at Heidi's who was mental, came in.
When the first time she was sectioned, I used to visit her when I was at college, because she was there for about three or 4 months. And one of the times I visited her, she said, "Oh, I've made this friend. Do you want to meet him?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." So she goes, "Oh, we get to go in a different room," because otherwise I'd be in the smoker's room, which was awful, because everyone in there was just like chain smoking. And she brought this boy in, and he was like jumping on tables and making animal noises. And I was only 18 at the time. I was just like, I don't really know how to deal with this, so I'm just going to pretend it's not happening. So I carried on talking to her, and after a little bit of time, like settled down, came and sat next to us, and then just started having normal conversations with us. And it was weird, because I think at the time I was thinking, well, he was acting crazy a minute ago. And because I didn't know how to deal with it, I just pretended it wasn't happening. And then he calmed down and just had normal conversation with me. And it really struck me at the time, this was, years before coming across the principles, that what is it to be crazy? And what is that behavior if you could suddenly switch it off? And yeah, the next time I saw him, it was just, "Oh, Jenny, remember me?" And it was weird, because when I was there was 2 other people from college that had been sectioned through drug misuse and had like breakdowns and things. And so they were 17, 18. I was going to pick on Dan, only if you want to. There's been some, like, because we've had conversations online and spent time together, there's been things that you've seen, that you've shared with me, that I've just thought of brilliant. And if you wanted to share them, I'd love you to share them, but don't.
Yeah, I've just been sort of thinking today about how for me it's all the same thing. And when Dave described it before as it all being a piece of string and all taking different shapes and form, and them thoughts you like and those thoughts you don't like. I was sort of seeing it like the heartbeat monitor in the hospital, and there's this movement that's always going along, and we don't want those ones, and we just want those ones, when just sort of having that acceptance for whatever's showing up and whatever's there. I think because there's a part of my ego is sort of, am I getting it? Am I still getting it? Am I not getting it? And that's the heartbeat thing as well. That's another thought, and it's just sort of not putting judgment around remembering it, because it's never gone anywhere. That's what's on my mind at the moment.
Nice. Yeah, I remember that. Was that just a conversation you and I? Was it on a community?
Yeah, community.
Yeah, because I think I forget who it was on there. Had a piece of string.
No, you dealt with a lady on one-to-one.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah, and just this lady, I said, when you first came, I screwed this piece of string up into a bottle. I said, "That's how you work." And she was all over the spot. She was in the right tangled mess inside of us. I said, bit by bit, it's unravelled. It's just unravelled. And I said, "But can you see that the same thing that created the tangled mess is the same thing that created the unravelling and the straight bit of string? It's all string." I said, you can make a string, you can put a piece of string into any string. It'll still be string. You can turn a piece of string into a jumper, you can turn it into trousers, you can turn it into a t-shirt, a hat, a pair of shoes. You can knit yourself a house if you wanted. 10. car, you can knit teddy bears, you can turn a piece of string into any shape. But it will always be string, made of string, but it will appear to look like a jumper, knitted hedgehog, a pair of curtains. It's all string. And it's like, this is what we were saying, this community group, whether the string takes a bow upwards and it's like an elevated, happy experience, it takes a loop downwards, it's all string. It's all fun. We're so busy looking at the loops, and we're so busy looking at the jumpers, and we're so busy looking at the tangled mess of what appears to be our life. We forget to look at what it's made of. And this was Sid's message all along. Sid's message was, stop looking at what you're thinking. Stop being so mesmerized by what you are thinking and what you are experiencing and what you are feeling. And try and see if you can see what is creating it all. And if you really do see what is creating it all, you will realize it's inside of you. You are
sorry.
creating it. No, you're
I
right.
remember Jenny saying about solving a problem, and if the solving of the problem was in the thinking, you've done it already. And it sort of it hit something in me, and I think I heard someone say, I think they like paraphrase it from Sid, it was analysing your moods and your feelings. It's like getting back in the shower to get dry. It's just not, you're not going to get it through that. And I think we all forget that. But when you sort of come across that, it's all there. And we're telling Dave the other day, when I went to see Dave and Jen this year, another thing that stood out was when you shared something about it's all thought and one turtle being sat on another turtle. What's keeping that turtle? Another turtle, and another turtle's keeping that one. And it's just thought all the way down. And went and got my daughter when I were up here a turtle teddy and just took it back, and I said, that's called Davy.
And she's called that.
She is, yeah. And I gave this teddy, and she's not been asked about it. When I left to come up here just the other day, she's running out house with this teddy, turtle teddy, which were funny.
I must think, when you gave it to her, she did, like, when you first gave it to her,
Oh,
she
yeah.
liked it, you said, she smiled, and
Yeah.
you said in your head, it was almost like you can smile at thought.
Yeah,
Same way she
and,
smiled at the turtle.
and no matter what's showing up, you can be aware of it. You can fear it or smile at it. You don't need to. It's not all one way. It's you're the awareness of it.
I'm not sure you said it earlier, but it's something that we often speak to on retreats, the idea of kind of, we're at the mercy of whatever comes to mind. And that almost we have no control. And then one of the things you like to do with people is like ask someone the name, and then they tell you the name and how old are you and what's your birthday, and you're like, well, isn't it interesting? They're not random answers. I didn't ask you your name and you just say, like,
Quarantine.
yeah, like you've gone back and you've given an answer. Like there's a part of you that's able to give the right answer. There has to be some level, and I think when it comes to that idea of us being powerless, it's like, well, what are we identifying with? An ego is a creation and it's in form and really is in the past. Like, so that has no power. But what we are is the most powerful thing. And I think that's the difference. Like when we start identifying with what we are, then we start feeling more powerful. And I know when we did the stuff in the township, there's a lady that looked like she hated us for like the first 2 days. And then on the third day, at the end, we asked, could we get some interviews and, you know, what people been hearing? And she was just like, I just feel so powerful. I just I feel full of love. And she said, suddenly realizing that you're not at the mercy of what you think. You're not at the mercy that shift in consciousness. She was getting all these new ideas about what to do in her family. And I think it's that we have loads of people like, have we got free will or not free will? And is there like God's mind and our mind and all of that stuff? But there's one mind. And we're all part of that. And it is what we attribute ourselves as. Are we thinking that we are our ego and our character, or are we thinking that we're that part of us that's been there since we were born? Like, what is it that was there observing life in our first memories, being aware of our creation? That awareness hasn't gone anywhere. That awareness isn't powerless. That awareness is where everything comes from. So I think I know there's been people sometimes that have come across the principles and start thinking, God, I'm just going to be kind of thrown, it's just whatever comes in. But it does seem that the more we stop identifying ourselves as a limited being and recognize that there's something deeper and more to us, then the kind of thinking that comes to us does change and does align with more to do with love and compassion and connection, because that is our truest state. So there's a couple of things have been said over a few days, and I kept thinking, trying to remember to speak to it, because we're not powerless.
No. Like, people have heard people say, I've said it, I thought this at one point as well. We do not have free will. But there is obviously a will within this universe in order to create. And it's intelligent. So then that leaves in a place where, well, there isn't free will, there's just God's will. Well, that instantly creates a duality. A duality that doesn't exist. There is me and there is God. That's what religion's based on. There is me and there is God. Jesus Christ was a man who continuously said, the kingdom of heaven, God's kingdom, the kingdom exists within the heart of every man, woman, and child. We are all that. So therefore, we are all the will of God. We are all God. There is no duality. The thing that we've always tried to attribute free will to is an ego. And it's because it's been so tricky to see as the ego. I think Sid's definition of ego is the best I've heard yet. What is ego? It's everything we believe to be true about ourselves and this world. Everything we believe to be true about ourselves, entire world, other people, sciences. That's ego. But then what is ego? That's massive. But it's nothing. And it's the ego that dies. It's the ego that falls apart. And as it falls apart, we don't disappear. We just become more open. We become more interested in life because we don't think we already know it. Remember little Otis? Two little birds flying over at Jen's house, two pigeons flying over, and Otis, who's 2 years old, was like, as they were coming right towards us, and he was like, and he nearly fell over backwards watching them. And Jen was like, wow, look at that. Did you see how interested he was in the pigeons? Yeah, because he hasn't created a concept around pigeons yet. They are miraculous flying beings to Otis. To us, I can give that a word. I know what that is. It's a pigeon. It's no longer interesting. Because we've developed language and we give things labels. And the moment we give something a label, we think we know what it is. What is a pigeon? A Pigeon is a bird, all right, well, what's a bird? Well, it's a type of animal that has a beak and 2 legs and usually has wings. Most of them fly.
Is there any birds without wings?
Not really. There's some with really stunted wings, like very useless wings.
But always have wings.
Yeah, and it's like, well, what is an animal? Well, an animal is an organism animated by consciousness again and thought. Okay, well, what is consciousness? You know, you take the pigeon, you reverse engineer it, you will always get back to, I don't know. There is the mystery of life right there at the heart of all things. That's the truth. That is truth. Everybody who's looking for truth is looking for the mystery, the magic, before we stick a word on it, before we identify with it, before we think we know something about it. This is why the intellect is of no use in this conversation. The intellect is the thing that thinks it knows, and in all fairness, that's what we've been trained in the West, is intellectual. It's been favored. The intellect's been favored over the wisdom of our being, insight. And that was Sid's message. He was like, wake up beyond the intellect. Wake up to something beyond the intellect. And when you wake up to that, you will feel it. Some people find they start to wake up to it. And how do you know you're starting to wake up to it? Because you wake up in the morning and you just feel different. That's it, coming to the surface. That's the ego starting to take a back seat. It's not difficult. It's not difficult to see past the ego. It happens all the time.
Has anyone else got questions or things they've seen? Or doesn't even have to be things they've seen on this weekend, like just things that they've found helpful. since
Yeah,
learning about this.
Just following on with what Dan said and Dave's been saying, I remember I've seen it here over this weekend, and that was, and it helped me at the time. I hadn't really seen it, and that was analysis causes paralysis. I've sort of experienced that.
Yeah.
And seen other people that have experienced it.
It's a nice statement.
I was outside at lunchtime just walking all the leaves at the bottom, and it's like right at the bottom of the garden, it's like a really thick blanket of leaves. There's absolutely no ground, there's thousands of leaves. And I was just thinking again, you know, it's sort of thought it before, you know, like all the leaves, thousands of leaves, you know, thousands of thoughts a day. It's just like we were saying about like the yoga pot and the someone committing suicide, you know, there's thousands of leaves, all like the same weight on the ground, but we give so much more weight to one thought than another. And then I just started like kicking them away and thinking, I was like kicking the leaves. It was a really big blanket, and I thought, God, you know, I can just kick any thought away. You know, I don't have to give, we do give, you know, we make some thoughts much more important than other thoughts, don't we, every day?
Yep.
And I'm not going to stop having thoughts. Good thoughts, bad thoughts, like you say, evil thoughts, joyful thoughts, loving thoughts, you know, but we don't have to, why do we always just concentrate on the negative ones? They give so much more weight to them. And then we start thinking, then you go off on like a little thought train and you're away, aren't you? But yeah, you just notice them and sort of kick them away, and if they come back, they come back. If you go, you don't have to sit around for days, weeks, months thinking about things.
Nice. Nice.
How about something similar?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Dinner time, after dinner, a little more. I've got my hat, scarf and books on, and I thought, I just want to sit up there and watch what's happening. Looking for a red squirrel because I haven't seen one yet. But
but I'm just gonna stay here and just sit with myself out there. And then I was just watching the leaves and there was ones just coming down. And then there would be a few more coming down when the winter came, there was a few more coming down. And then all of a sudden this great big like gush of wind came and they started circling in like the open space out there. And it was like, I'm comparing myself to these because it's like my life. I can sit and I can have these little problems and just let them go back. But as soon as that wind gets hold, I'm in the hurricane of the leaves down the bottom there. And then I just sat with it and watched them all settle down. And I'm thinking, this is what I'm comparing myself to a leaf because this is my life. You know, it feels the same way. I was connected to them leaves at that time. That's lovely. So I'm pleased to stay back.
And I could see the last time you said about staying back, it was from a different place and you said you were staying back 5 minutes before, so
Yeah.
I was thinking, I was like, oh, stay back then.
Like, I want to argue. Every bit of me wants to argue. I need my intellect. I need to say that's a tree, so I can dismiss it and move on. But then I just realised, yeah, but most of the time I spend my mind talking about shit. If I was doing something,
Me too.
and I just could dismiss all these other things because I was doing all this wonderful, exciting stuff. Brilliant. Yeah. Yeah.
My mind thinks a lot of shit as well. Nonsense, utter nonsense.
I think the reason I used to love hanging out with my nephew Archie when he was really little, because he would just like be amazed at a tree. And one of the things he used to love doing was any of the drains, he used to love dropping stones down it and like listening to it or like shouting down it and hearing. And like a walk that could take 5 minutes, we could take 2 hours to do. And it is that, what else do I think I need to think about that's more important than just being present with him and going for a walk? And like, again, like we're not saying the intellect is incredible. Like it's created the ability to be able to record this and us to be able, like phones, like there's such an important place for it, but it is just so much of the time that's where we live. And we miss the magic. We miss actually being amazed at stuff.
Using it at the wrong time as well, though, that's what I was thinking. Because, you know, yeah, you don't need it on all the time.
It's interesting, Andrew, you said just before, you know, you said the word problem. Is there really any such thing as a problem in the world? Ever? There's a few people shaking their heads. But know that there is no such thing as a problem outside of our minds. Problems are perspectives. A problem is a perspective of thought. I like this, and I often use this analogy, but it's like when Donald Trump was president, he realized that Greenland was melting and he wanted to buy it off Denmark. Why? Because the ice is melting. Brilliant. There's some good stuff underneath there. Do you know what the problem is? It's too much frigging ice on Greenland right now. And then you've got the other people around the world going, Greenland's melting. That's a problem. You see, it is a perspective of mind. And we can say, well, of course it's a problem. Of course it's a problem that Greenland's melting. Is it? Is it really terrible? Is it really the end of the world? You see, the way that we would come to that conclusion is we would start to imagine the future and what it's going to look like. We do not know. We do not know. And I think when we start to come back to that point, like, we start to wake up and we realize, oh, problems, ultimately, there are no problems in the world. The biggest problem the world faces is human beings misunderstand reality. We misunderstand the nature of how life works. I know. I knew the moment I pulled them out, I thought there's going to be this constant racket. I thought I should have bought some. Oh, Kelly's eating them up. Yeah, it was such a beautiful thing for me to wake up to and realize problems, they're thoughts, not things. Problems are thoughts, not things.
Got a really basic question. When you were saying in the last session about Archie's castle at the bottom of the stairs, I think it was Archie. I really felt for him. And I, you know, I get the idea of, you know, it's his, how he's interpreting that situation, but he did feel those feelings. So like, if you see that in a child, feeling those feelings and feeling that frustration, that anger, that's happened, like, what's next with that? Like, it's a really, really basic question. I think I'm getting the principles on another level, but that basic thing, when something happens that causes your thoughts to make you feel a certain way, I get that happens, but it's kind of what do you do with that? And I can.
We're always looking for something to do.
Myself, what about Archie?
Yeah, you
Well,
see.
but also the interesting thing, if she'd done that, she used to do that all the time. And like she would get told off and have to apologise and all those kind of things. But Archie never used to care. Like he'd just start making it again. But at some point he started like attributing his feeling to an external source. And we all do that in our lives. And when we do that, we literally hand out strings. This is what we talk to the kids about in schools. You hand out strings of your well-being. So people, you're almost like a puppet. So it's not that there's going to be, like, it's not that people don't do things that aren't kind. It's not that people don't, and there are consequences, but his experience of it used to just be like, oh, start rebuilding it.
Yeah.
And then suddenly he got attached to the form. He got attached to the form of his castle, and then he blamed her for how he felt. But it cannot be true because it never used to bother him. So if it really was that incident that created his feeling, everyone would feel like that if they created a castle and it got destroyed. Yeah. If that makes sense. So it's not saying there aren't going to be things that happen in life that are really, and it's not saying we shouldn't be upset or miss something. Like, I think there's been people that have tried to almost, through principles themselves, to not feel grief. If I understand that it's just thought and they're part of everything, then I shouldn't feel sad. Yeah. It's like people are human beings.
I mean, relationships that weren't working.
Like, we're not mechanical. But I think it was just interesting being witness to him suddenly going from being a child that just was like, well, she's done that, carry on. And he just rebuilds stuff all the time or do something different. It just didn't affect him to suddenly she was the bane of his life, wasn't she? And he used to call everyone bad boys, like even if they were girls. And suddenly Lewin was like the bad boy. He didn't want to touch him.
Lewin.
Yeah.
Jane, can you speak about the string thing you teach us?
Well, no, one of the things we tried to tell them is that we ask what makes you happy, what makes you sad. So often it will be like being allowed on the internet or computer games, and like my mum can make me happy. And so then I think one of the things we do, we got them to draw it out, and it's like saying to them, well, what if you can't play your computer games? Can you not be happy? And they're like, no, I'm so miserable if I can't play my computer. Are you ever happy when you're not playing computer games? And like, well, yeah, sometimes but just trying to get them to see that the happiness doesn't come from the thing that they're doing. The happiness doesn't come from another person. Because otherwise you start thinking your happiness is dependent on certain things being a certain way. And they get it really quickly. Like when one of the kids you work with in South Africa, you only chatted to him for about 15 minutes on the break, and then he was part of a 2-hour session for 8 to 13-year-olds. And he'd been struggling to sleep and you asked him, what does he think about? And he's worried that his mum wouldn't be there when he woke up.
Yeah.
And he said a lot of thought on his mind.
Gorgeous, Gabriel.
And you said to him, wow, you've got that much thought in your mind. No wonder sometimes it's hard to sleep. And you had just a bit of a chat with him. And then we didn't see them then again. And then 2 weeks later, it just happened that this mother knows someone on our 6-month programme.
Jewish geography. Jewish people know everybody. They call it Jewish geography.
And Sylvia came up to her, she goes, oh, do you remember little Gabriel? I went, oh God, yeah, he was gorgeous. And she goes, well, his mum told me that night he went home and he slept and didn't keep getting up and needing her. But then the next night, he went to bed and then he got up, went back into the other room and he gave his mum his teddy. And he said, Mum, I don't need this. My security doesn't come from this. And went to bed without his teddy.
I never spoke to him about security or anything.
No, we didn't use that word,
It's not
I don't
my
think,
kind of
because
language.
especially as there's a lot of little ones, but he suddenly realised that he'd put all of his well-being on needing this teddy to feel all right, and he didn't need it anymore.
Can you talk to that, Teddy? You know, like, I mean, as in, yeah, because you see children doing that, don't you? Putting their security in their teddy. Mine did that,
I did.
Teddies. Yeah, you know, as you're about to be a mum yourself, you know, they fall over and you give them a blanket, they, they're happy.
So you can see how easy it is to think the blanket makes them happy. But the problem is when you lose it. And like Ishka used to have this a toy when she was from very young called Foxy, and it went everywhere with her. And then she lost it for how many months? I think probably Lou hid it, but it was for a long time.
Took a hammer.
And it took her weeks.
Dog ate it, didn't it, as well?
That was another time. And my mum tried to. It took her weeks to be able to get to sleep at night without it. But then my sister realised, God, she's got so attached to this thing, it had to go everywhere with her. In a way, it was helpful that it went missing for a bit, because then she did learn that she was all right. And then when she found it, she loved it, but she didn't attach her well-being to it in the same way anymore. I mean, then the dog did completely pull it apart. My mum tried to fix it, but she said it didn't feel the same anymore. So she didn't like it.
But that's it, you know, that teddy is everything on earth. It's money, it's relationships, it's houses, it's the financial system, it's politics, it's work. Partners, yeah, it's life, it's death. It's the future, it's the past. You know, people come to us, oh, can you talk around this? Well, we can, but it's pointless. It's not the point. The point is whatever we are experiencing, it's coming from within our own being via thought. We are dreaming it, we are thinking it. Whether we think it's terrible that Foxy's, you know, or it's been eaten, or I've lost Foxy, or, you know, oh, it's all right, it's not the end of the world. It comes from the same place. It's the same thing, creating a different experience. How we use thought determines how we experience life. So whether it's a blanket, oh, I feel secure when I've got a blanket around me, I feel nice. You know, well, that's coming from thought. If I feel claustrophobic because I've got a blanket around me, well, that's coming from thought. So it's like when we start to see this singular point, you will start to find the essence of reality. And when you start to find the essence of reality, life starts to make more sense. And as you start to become aware of it, it becomes more magical. You know, really, is it not a miracle we're all here? Explain humanity, how it got here. Yeah, science has got its theories. I know for a fact it's missing the point. It's missing the point. Oh, we all started as single-celled organisms, and somehow, oh, there was matter, and suddenly these chemicals came together, and all of a sudden, lightning hit it, I think, possibly, and then consciousness suddenly got infused into matter, and it's all just chance. It's not. It's beautiful. It's orchestrated. It's intelligent. It's purpose. It's divine. It's beyond matter.
Can I ask a question about this Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, and then it was just coming to, it's 5:15.
Yes, fine.
Yeah, go for it.
Afterwards, or?
No, ask it now, ask it now.
I can totally see this business with the we're living in a world concept. But it seems to me that there's a fundamentally different, let's take an object like my old slipper. You may not call it a slipper, you may not give it a word at all, but there definitely seems to be, there's a thing here. I don't know what it's made of, it could be energy, I don't know what energy is, but there's something here. And then you have the concept slipper. And the concept slipper and whatever this is, seems to be fundamentally different things, fundamentally. And that seems to be a real, there's a duality of substance there. The concept seems to be made of something entirely different to whatever this thing is. And that just seems to be a massive dualism to me that I can't get ahead of.
How do you know you've got a slipper in your hand? If I'm getting your question right, then that's my
I don't know what
question.
slipper, let's just take away the word slip. There are concepts we make up,
Yeah.
thoughts, like slipper, or, tree, table, laptop.
Words.
Words, there are concepts, they're kind of mental constructions. And we live in these mental constructions. And those seem to be fundamentally different types of things to matter, people. The concept of a person is completely different to the reality. There is thought, matter seems to be different to concepts. Let's just put it like that.
Okay. What creates concepts?
The mind?
Okay. Where do you experience matter?
Yeah, that's true. The mind. Yeah. It's just a different type of thought.
It's the same thing.
It is, yeah, okay.
It's the same thing. Inside and outside. We talk about inside and outside. There is no
It's all the
outside.
same.
There's no such thing as outside.
Okay.
Where do you experience anything?
But in that case, the concept has just the same reality as whatever this is.
Yeah.
So there's no.
In essence, yes.
They're basically the same.
In essence, yes. But in the reality that we experience in this three-dimensional, colourful, vibrant life, all appears different. And isn't that the fun?
Yeah.
You and I were having a conversation the other day, and all of a
Right,
sudden-
last thing, and then we're going to take
all
a
of a
break.
sudden Molly started speaking, and she's like, "Fucking hell, you humans take life so fucking why don't you just not realise it's all in the moment?" She's like licking those and putting his voice on the phone. I just looked at them and burst out laughing. And it was like the wisdom exploded through our conversation, slapped us both on the face and went, "Fucking lighten up, you know." We don't have to take life so seriously. Not saying Ross that, but it was just so brilliant because we were in this really like serious conversation, and then just the dog's voice popped in, a bit like Rusty's does. Like, come on, you mom. It's all in the moment. The analysis is what. pulls us
Analysis is the
under.
paralysis. I like that.
Yeah.
Break time. Come back at 1:30. 10 minutes, come back at 1:30. 15 minutes, come back at 25 to.
What is it, Dave?
15 minutes.